I'm James Kliemt from Queensland Police. What we did wasn't very complicated. What we did was based on what we'd been doing for the 6 months leading up to that, which was essentially just reproducing the media releases we were putting out every day. Having our media staff, we've got about 25 media staff, and they would go through a process when they put out a media release, get approval for it, email it to a list of journalists, put it on our Queensland Police webpage, and at the end we added to that and posted it up on Facebook. And that very simply started out, initially our director was the only person who did that, very nervously sort of published a couple of things and waited to see what the outside world did, and for quite some time the outside world didn't do very much. It built up over time, and to the point where we had about 8,000, 9,000 followers before the floods hit, and we slowly taught the staff, who are all media people, not social media people. I'm the only social media person there. How to use these different technologies, and to not only the technologies but the cultural stuff.
Yes, can you specify which technologies you used?
I can. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and a live stream for our live video. And it was, some of the people in the team have no idea of social media and no experience with it whatsoever, and were quite sceptical at first and warmed to it as time went on. Some still aren't that interested in it, and we've got some people who are much more au fait with the technologies than others. And so that just built us up to the point that when that happened, we could just follow our standard processes at a much faster and much higher rate. And some of the information sources changed a little in terms of, all of a sudden different departments started emailing us their press releases and saying, can you please put this on your Facebook page, which was kind of, seemed kind of strange at first. And we looked at places like the ABC and just different sources where information was coming in. And yeah, I always say, I wish I could say we did something particularly brilliant or insightful at the time that was the master stroke that made it all work. But to us, we just made rational decisions based on the situation we were in. We don't have a lot of policy yet. We don't have a lot of formal policy yet bound up in what we're doing. The information would just come in, and that information could come from, example we often talk about is Kim, the director, has an iPad. She would sit in meetings with the Premier as the Premier was being briefed about what was going on, and she would tweet from her iPad, or Facebook from her iPad, what the Premier was just told then. She obviously had the authority to do that. But our approval processes didn't involve, if something uncontroversial that was factual, that was of high public interest, a low-level person could say that obviously needs to go out, and so that information, they could approve that information there without having to go up through a big approval chain. And that's fairly typical of, it's a slightly shorter process than our normal process, but that's fairly typical of what we've sort of done the whole time.
James, can I butt in and ask you, how did you respond to questions online? How are you responding to inquiries that you were receiving during the crisis situation?
Just depending on the question. If it was a reasonable question, we try and give them the best answer we could.
And were you, as the operator of the technology, empowered to just respond?
Absolutely. There was no choice. You couldn't sit around and say, oh, I wonder what the policy says about this or this or this. It was a crisis situation and people's lives were on the line, and so you just had to do that.
So there was no approval processes required during?
No. We have professional people working professional communications people working in these situations, and you have to have an element of trust, and we do have an element of trust in our people that they're not going to say something stupid.
Did you have a plan? Were you prepared? Like, was the organisation thinking about this kind of situation when they set up this technology, and was that what you were preparing?
Our plan was to be as agile as possible, and that putting in rigid policy was going to be was going to cause many more problems than it would have solved. And so we had to be reactive because we had never done this before, and not many people had done this sort of thing before, especially to this level. Certainly since the floods, it's really proven to us that that's what we had to do. we had to put it out there and make sensible decisions as things happen, because you cannot. The world is such a big place and there are so many people. They bring random elements that you, sitting in a room trying to come up with your policy, are never going to be able to interpret or guess what they are. And you putting a box around what you're going to do, all that's going to do is put you in a real world situation that you can't deal with properly.
Okay, thanks. We're going to come back to James. I'm going to ask everybody in the panel to speak for a couple of minutes about their experience, and then we'll go through and ask a series of questions, and then everyone from the floor will have a chance to ask some questions. Judith and Marie are both from Ergon Energy. They're both going to answer these questions. So you've got 5 minutes, guys, to just give us a real outline of the experience that happened during the crisis situation and how you handled it online, what you were trying to achieve, whether or not, just as I said to James, whether or not you guys had a bit of a plan, and if you thought it through ahead of time, what were you trying to achieve using the online medium?
Okay, well, we used Facebook and Twitter. Basically, the purpose of using those was to communicate preparation information about what to do before a cyclone comes, get prepared to be without electricity for a period of time, updates on the outages of the electricity and when they would be restored, and also the safety messages. We basically set it up into 3 phases. So there was that pre-event, the during, the event, and the recovery. It sort of set a part of our emergency response plan, which allowed us to, respond quickly, build relationships with our customers, and also protect our brand. I think that was a big thing for us. The concern was if we weren't in that space, what would happen online in Facebook and Twitter to our brand, and the negative posts that would go out. So by being a part of it, we were trying to protect our brand. We set up our Facebook and Twitter pages and had them hidden from the public to sort of test them, to test monitoring tools, to look at how we could use RSS feeds to automatically publish our media releases. Because we are a very risk-averse company, we had to show and demonstrate to our management team the capabilities of these tools, and actually what monitoring tools were out there, and how we could manage responding. So we had a 9-month period of trying to get that across the line. A lot of the conversations were all about risk, and not a lot of discussion about opportunity of using them. So too much focus on what the risks were, and but what if that happens? Well, we couldn't deal with that, but hang on, there's a lot of opportunity as a result. So until the Queensland, the Brisbane floods, until QPS sort of started to shine, that's when our management team started to open their eyes up to seeing the opportunities rather than just the risks. And we had, luckily, James come in and talk to our management team, and after that, when Cyclone Anthony was approaching, they decided, yes, we needed to be a part of it. We just weren't really prepared for 4 days later for Yasi to arrive on our doorstep as well. So we were happy to try to manage it between 3 people for Cyclone Anthony, but when Yasi arrived, we knew we had to expand to a bigger team.
So my role on the team was basically to manage the content and to lead the team of responders who are answering the questions and comments from our followers. One of the questions here asks about the internal processes that we use to develop and approve content, and basically we just followed the same processes that we already had in our disaster management plan. We focused on what we called the single source of truth, which was a report released by our government relations team very regularly. That report is also used to produce media releases. It goes to our contact centre, so it ensured that all the messages that all of our channels were sending out were consistent. And it also meant that whenever we had questions on there from our followers, our responders knew what to say. Most of the time, the information could be found in that plan.
So does that mean you were coordinating your communication across the different mediums at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. We were all liaising with our media relations team, our government relations team, our contact centre manager. We always knew what all the other channels were doing. And we also worked to refer back and forward between them. So for instance, on our website, it gave information on how people could follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Through Facebook, we referred people back to the contact centre if they needed more detailed information than we could provide.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we also, in a way, protected our website. When it was getting massive amounts of hits and was looking slightly stressed, it never actually crashed, I believe, did it, Marie?
We survived.
But we could see it was starting to get stressed, so we made sure that we didn't refer people from Facebook back to the website. So we sort of managed the balance of the channels in that way, just by communicating with each other.
And how did you do that communication with each other in such a crisis situation?
Oh, over the phone, by email, face-to-face when people were nearby. We had a special social media response room set up it was pretty cool, yeah. Lots of computers, 4 or 5 people on the team, food being delivered at a regular basis, so that was it was very supportive. And so we were actually in the head the office, Mary Street office in the city, so our media relations team, we could deal with them face-to-face, which was very invaluable. But for others who are up in town, so we could just talk to them over the phone and by email, yeah.
And how were you connecting with other sources of information, like QPS Media on Twitter and those other sites?
Well, mostly via those channels as well. We liked each other, of course. And we're keeping a very close eye on what they were doing as well, yeah.
Okay. So there was no formal process to coordinate your efforts?
No, we pretty much winged it.
Well, I think during, was it Anthony? I think Cyclone Anthony, Cyclone Tasha, and that crossed the first one. We were driving our media releases to the QPS, and also during our regional floods, we'd go to QPS. So after that, though, from Anthony and Yasi, we then, said sort of thanks very much.